The wind whistles through the empty stands like a warning breath, and for a moment you feel that brutal truth of old soccer again. A single, stupid mistake could bring entire careers crashing down. Between mud, sweat, and thousands of roaring voices, every player stood on the edge of the abyss, just a blink away from self-destruction. These are seven legends from 1950 to 1980 who almost lost everything due to one foolish second. And now, the first name begins. Top 1, George Best. George Best emerged in the 1960s like a storm of light and chaos, a dribbler with 181 goals in a United jersey who dismantled defenders one after another as if they were mere shadows. Old Trafford vibrated with his runs, every touch a spark, every fake a small explosion, and on big nights it seemed as if he had reinvented the speed of the game. Between league, European Cup, and international matches, he collected moments that were not just spectacular, but almost scientifically improbable. Tight turns that modern tracking systems today call reactive illogicality, accelerations that swept past defenders from a standstill, and a ball control that felt more like a mental connection than pure technique. But in the midst of the brilliance came the second that almost shattered his career, a sudden act of youthful overconfidence where he skipped practice, vanished as if the season were some playground, and Manchester United's management seriously considered dropping him. In slow motion, it was a decision of shocking stupidity. A player who effortlessly dominated Europe risked his own throne purely on a whim. Decades later, you see him in pictures and murals in Belfast and Manchester. A face of light and shadow, a man whose talent broke boundaries and whose mistakes almost swallowed him whole. And somewhere between his best dribbles and his most foolish moments, one line remains that describes him like no other. He was the artist who only became immortal because he survived the fall. Top 2. Johan Cruyff. Johan Cruyff moved across the fields of the 1970s like an architect racing against gravity, a playmaker who led Ajax in the Netherlands into an era of total, almost mathematical soccer with over 350 goal involvements. Every pass seemed like an equation, every running angle a piece of the future, and when he accelerated with the ball, it felt as if the game warped around him. Modern analyses confirm what the world only suspected back then. His 360-degree vision was 2 to 3 decisions ahead of everyone else. His changes of direction had a reaction offset that today's tracking systems can barely imitate. Yet in this almost superhuman control room of elegance came a moment of foolish overheating, an open, ill-considered conflict with Ajax officials and coaching staff, played out in the middle of a season where he was the irreplaceable engine. An outburst that seemed so unwise and impulsive that Ajax briefly considered removing him from the squad, a thought that, at the time, sounded like an assault on their own identity. A single spark of ego almost extinguished the genius who steered the team. Today, Cruyff is found in statues, foundational structures, academies, in every idea that Barcelona or Amsterdam define about youth soccer. A spirit that continues to work, even if the body has long since fallen silent. And above it all hovers a line that captures his career like a precise cut through time. He was the visionary who created a revolution and almost burned up in his own fire. Top 3. Franz Beckenbauer. Franz Beckenbauer glided through the 1960s and 1970s like a conductor of steel and silk, a libero who controlled the ball with nearly 90% passing accuracy and had the field laid out before him like an open book. 74 international matches leading up to the 1974 World Cup, over 500 games for FC Bayern, 4 league titles, 3 European Cups, numbers that make it seem as if someone had manipulated the boundaries of the game. His runs carried the calm of a man dictating the rhythm. His tackles had that perfect microsecond that today's analysis systems call decision window zero, timing that hardly seems human. Yet even in this sphere of control, there came one ill-considered second that almost broke his career. A moment of exaggerated toughness against himself when he continued to play, despite a stabbing shoulder injury, risking permanent damage to the joint. It was a stupid, almost defiantly heroic decision that exasperated every doctor and brought Beckenbauer's career to the brink of extinction by a hair's breadth. Today, his name stands like an engraving in German soccer. Statues, honorary jerseys, the quiet aura of a man who shaped generations. And above it all remains a sentence that captures the essence of his journey like a silhouette under floodlights. He was the general who steered the game and only escaped the abyss because he stopped in time. Top 4. Garrincha. Garrincha moved in the late 1950s and early 1960s like a phenomenon that defied the rules of the body. A winger whose crooked legs and unpredictable changes of direction produced over 240 goals and sent defenders into pure instinctive panic. His dribbles seemed as if he had an invisible grid under his feet, a pattern that today's data analyses call chaotic precision. Chaotic for opponents, precise for him. His acceleration was so explosive that years later it still serves as a reference for natural reactive force in Brazilian archives. But in this whirlwind of art and wildness, there was a moment of foolish overconfidence, an impulsive protest against a referee's decision that was so abrupt and unwise that the association considered removing him from the squad even before a decisive tournament. For seconds, the genius stood on the brink of sporting exodus, a player who single-handedly decided games, but almost eliminated himself with a senseless reaction. Today, Garrincha lives on in murals, songs, films, and in those nightly conversations of Brazilian fans who whisper his name like a magic that never quite fades. And for him, one line remains that carries all his contradictory beauty. He was the marvel who only continued to shine because fate forgave him just once. Top 5. Gerd Müller. Gerd Müller plowed through the 1960s and 1970s like a natural law on two legs, a penalty box predator with 568 goals for Bayern and 68 for Germany, whose shots came so fast and precisely that cameras of his time often only captured the ball in the net, but not the movement behind it. His turns seemed mechanically pre-programmed, a fraction of a second in which he aligned his body and the ball, which modern tracking systems today describe as instantaneous vector reorientation. No striker of that era combined mass, instinct, and spatial awareness as seamlessly as he did. But even this man, who for many redefined goal scoring, once stood on the edge of the abyss, a heated, ill-considered dispute with club management, triggered by an impulsive decision that was more defiance than logic. For a moment, he was the player Bayern might drop, and for an instant, it seemed as though he had risked his entire career with a single foolish outburst. Today, he is encountered as an immovable figure in German soccer memory. Statues, documentaries, honors, his silhouette in museums from Munich to Nördlingen. And above his story lies a line as tight as one of his famous turns before a shot. He was the cannon that misfired only once and was almost silenced by it. Top 6. Paolo Rossi. Paolo Rossi glided through the late 1970s like a slender hunter who smelled every uncertainty in the penalty area and decided entire games with just a few ball touches, scoring 134 professional goals and boasting an exceptional scoring rate that reshaped Italy's soccer history. His movements had something razor-sharp about them, barely visible, then suddenly lethally precise. Modern analyses show that his runs created an anticipatory time shift. Rossi often started before the situation had even logically developed. Yet in the midst of this controlled instinct came that moment of thoughtless naivete that almost extinguished his career. The slight, careless involvement in a dubious betting environment, a yes he shouldn't have given, a compliance that carried more recklessness than intent. For weeks, the sword of Damocles, a long suspension, hung over him, and Italy watched as a rising star slipped to the brink of darkness due to a single foolish second. Today, Rossi appears in documentaries, tribute shows, and commemorative events. His name flickers in old World Cup footage like a memory that Italy can't let go of. And above it all lies a line that carries the paradox of his journey. He was the silent finisher who only made history because he was allowed to return from the shadows once more. Top 7. Rudi Kröll. Rudi Kröll marched through the 1970s like a defender who seemed to command space itself, a left-footer with over 300 games for Ajax, and an elegance that often stifled the opponent's attack in its infancy. His tackles had the precision of a scalpel stroke, His long diagonal passes, a flight path that modern data models categorize as controlled parabolic tension, because they consistently fell with uncanny accuracy into the runs of his teammates. Kroll was not a loud player, but one who read the field like a strategy board, always a step ahead, always where the opponent least expected him. Yet even this master of control lost his footing for one tiny moment. An unnecessarily aggressive tackle in an insignificant friendly match, a challenge he never should have made, in which he twisted his knee so severely that doctors were already discussing a possible career end. A stupid, impulsive overestimation of his own body brought him to the brink of nothingness, and fate almost erased him from an era in which he was one of the central architects of Dutch soccer philosophy. Today, Kroll is seen as a calm titan, sitting in honorary stands, providing analyses, appearing in youth academies, and whose name is etched in the concrete of history in Amsterdam like a fine engraving. And in the end, one line remains that describes him like a cut through the silence. He was the defender who preserved order, and only came too close to chaos once. When the last images fade, only the echo of those seconds remains, when careers stood on the brink of collapse. These stories show how narrow the path between greatness and downfall once was, and how much willpower was needed to return. If such journeys into the deep shadows of soccer captivate you, then support the video with a like, leave your comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any chapter of this era.